All right, so here are the life science practice questions. So we'll go through some of these. I'm not sure we'll get to all of them or that we necessarily need to even get through all of them. But we'll just kind of see. The science questions are good because they're a little bit more challenging, I think, than the social studies practice questions. So that's good. I think they give us a better idea of kind of what to expect on the GED test. So let's just go ahead and get started. There's significantly more reading on some of these questions, so I will read through them, but if you feel like you want to read them on your own screen, then just mute me and you can read through it and we can talk about it after. So, number one talks about cell membranes, and it says, cell membranes are selectively permeable, allowing some substances to pass through and blocking others. Movement through the cell membrane takes place by means of passive or active transport. Passive transport, materials like water move through the cell's membrane without using any of the cell's energy. Active transport is the movement of materials in the cell areas of low concentration to areas of high concentration. In active transport, the cell uses energy to move substances in and out. For example, transport proteins use energy when they carry molecules into and out of the cell. Okay, so there's a lot going on there, right? First of all, lots of vocabulary, lots of science terms, right? So don't get overwhelmed by it. Just read it, do the best you can, and if you don't feel like like it made a lot of sense, just keep going. Just keep pushing through it, right? What you'll find is when you get to the question, something will trigger you and you'll be able to go back and find what you need. So if you don't understand it perfectly, don't reread it. You don't have time for that. Just read it, figure it out, move on, and just keep going through it. All right. So the question asks, what is the main difference between passive and active transport? Okay. So they kind of describe it up here, right? They describe passive transport here. They describe active transport here. And let's just read the options and see what the multiple choices are, and see if we kind of narrow down to a couple options. So, A, active transport involves the passage of water, and passive transport does not. B, active transport requires the cell to use energy, and passive transport does not. C, active transport is used by animal cells, and passive transport is used by plant cells. Or D, active transport takes substances out of the cell, and passive transport brings them in. Okay, so again, lots of reading, lots of stuff to kind of sift through. So just chip away at it, okay? The more we can kind of make this question simple, the better off we're going to be. So first, let's just see if we can get rid of any of these options, right? One I think we can get rid of is C. Active transport is used by animal cells. Passive transport is used by plant cells. Nowhere in that paragraph do they ever mention animals or plants. It's not mentioned. So throw it out. The next one I'd probably throw out would be A. Active transport involves the passage of water. Passive transport does not. Okay? Whether or not that's true, I can look up here where it says in passive transport, materials like water move through the cell's membrane. Okay? That implies that there are lots of materials that use passive transport, including water, which goes against A, so making A false. So even though we maybe don't have any idea of the right answer, we've gotten rid of A and we've gotten rid of C. So between B and D, let's just pick the one that makes the most sense. B, active transport requires the cell to use energy and passive transport does not. Or D, active transport takes substances out of the cell and passive transport brings them in. Okay, so is there any mention of energy? Now, we do see passive transport, blah, 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 without using any of the cell's energy. Active transport talks about using energy to move substances in and out. So the fact it even says in and out means that D is false, because active and passive transport can go both ways. They can both go in and they can both go out, right? And so the right answer here is B. Active transport requires the cell to use energy. Passive transport does not. So we talked about this topic a couple weeks ago, but even if you don't have any idea what these two things are, active and passive transport, you can still answer the question. Right? There's still enough information. Okay, let's move on. And not all of these are quite that long in terms of reading. All right, so let's look at number 2. Number 2 is Ben sets up an experiment to prove that ivy plants take in water through their roots. He took a jar, put in an ivy plant in the open jar, and filled the jar with water to cover only the roots of the ivy. After a week, he checked the water level in the jar and found that it had gone down. Ben concluded that the plant had absorbed water through its roots. Why does Ben have insufficient proof? So in science, it's not necessarily about just being right, because he's right. Water is absorbing through the roots. But the way he set up his experiment, he left out, or he failed to think about one important thing. Okay? And so let's look at these 4 options and see if we can't figure it out. A, Ben should have put more ivy plants in the open jar. That doesn't really make sense. B, Ben should have put several plants of different species in the open jar. Well, if he's just testing ivy, then he doesn't need other plants either, so B doesn't make sense. So throw out A and B, and let's look at C and D. C says the water level in the jar might have gone down because of evaporation, and D says there should have been soil in the jar rather than water. Those make sense. Again, remember his hypothesis, his theory that he's testing is that ivy plants take in water through their roots. So it wouldn't make sense to replace the water with soil, because he's testing if water absorbs. So the right answer is C. The water level in the jar might have gone down because of evaporation. He could have figured out a way to seal off the jar but still have the roots of the plant in there. Then he could have proven the only way water could escape was through the roots of the ivy, right? So that's why he has insufficient proof, because he left the jar open and water evaporates over time, right? All right, so let's look at number 4. We're gonna skip number 3 because it's not worded right. But I do like this question, and it hits on what Caleb talked about yesterday, which is heredity and genetics. So let's zoom out and let's look at this. First, I'll read the paragraph and look at this chart, and then we'll answer number 4. And as I'm going through this, if you do have questions, stop me. Send me a question in the chat. We can talk about whatever you want to talk about in terms of life science. And if life science is something that you haven't been to a lot of the classes on, that's fine. You can go watch the old videos to kind of catch back up on the YouTube channel, or you can just do the review and take it for what it's worth, right? It's still gonna help you out when it comes to the science. So number 3 and 4, I guess, deal with this paragraph. So the paragraph says, pedigree shows the pattern of inheritance of a trait in a family. The name of this chart down here is called a pedigree. In a pedigree, circles represent females, squares represent males. A completely shaded shape, in other words, all the way dark, indicates that the person has that specific trait. A half-shaded shape indicates the person carries the recessive form of the gene, not have the trait, right? So, like if this were eye color and the trait was blue eyes, right? it's possible to carry the trait of having blue eyes but not actually have blue eyes. Something weird, that's just the way genetics works. Things are passed down. That's the reason that your children don't necessarily have the same eye color. It's possible there are genes, you know, that aren't visible that get passed down through your genetics. Okay? So, a completely unshaded shape indicates the person neither has nor carries the trait. Right? So they have no sign of the trait whatsoever. In this pedigree down here, Megan is a carrier of the genetic disorder cystic fibrosis, although she is, in other words, she does not have cystic fibrosis, but she carries the recessive trait to pass it on. Okay, so in this chart here, again, circles are females, squares are males. The way that this is set up, like a family tree, this is Megan's mom, Megan's dad. This is Megan's spouse, and Will has two brothers, Peter and Ian, and this is their parents, right? So Megan's mom, no sign of of cystic fibrosis. Will's dad, no sign of it. His brothers, no sign of it. It's only these two that carry it and have passed it on. So the question asks, number 4 asks, which one of the following best explains why Megan's and Will's families were surprised to learn Caitlin had inherited cystic fibrosis? Caitlin is Megan and Will's daughter. She has cystic fibrosis. Okay. Why is it surprising to their family that she has it? Question. A, Megan and Will are carriers of cystic fibrosis. That's true. They are carriers. Does that explain why they would be surprised? So be careful, right? That's a logical sounding answer, but it's a true statement, but it doesn't really answer the question. So be careful there. B, some of Will's distant ancestors had cystic fibrosis. C, Megan's father and Will's mother are carriers of cystic fibrosis. And D, no one in either Megan or Will's immediate family has cystic fibrosis. Okay, so this is a good example of a question where they give you 4 true statements. In other words, all 4 of these things are true, right? Megan and Will are carriers of cystic fibrosis. Some of Will's distant ancestors did have it. Megan's father and Will's mother are carriers. Okay? So, and no one in Megan or Will's immediate family has it. So, if they're all 4 true, which one is correct? In other words, which one answers the question? And if the question is, why are they all surprised? The one that makes the most sense is D. Because even though there are traits here, right, no one actively is showing signs of having cystic fibrosis, right? So even though Megan's dad is a carrier and Will's mom is a carrier, they don't have it, and so they don't know that they're a carrier, right? And so no one in this immediate family has it at all. So that would be the only explanation as to why their families would be surprised that Caitlin inherited cystic fibrosis. Okay, well, let's move on. So let me go over this. This is a good example of a difficult question. So I'll read through it and then we'll go through these questions. The paragraph talks about mitosis. Mitosis is a type of cell division in which 2 daughter cells are formed that have the same genetic material as the parents. Before mitosis starts, each chromosome in the nucleus duplicates itself to produce 2 sections, chromatids, which are linked. Those chromatids then split so that each daughter cell has DNA identical to that of the parent cell and to that of the other daughter cell. The function of the spindle fiber in mitosis is to control the movement of chromatids during mitosis. During the metaphase, for example, the spindle fiber helps to align the chromatids in a line across the middle of the cell so that the chromatids can divide evenly. Spindle fibers then direct the movement of the chromatids after they split, ensuring that the daughter cell has a full set of identical chromatids. And then they have a visual aid of the process of mitosis. So here, in early prophase, goes to metaphase, anaphase, telophase. Okay? So this is a great example of a question that you very likely might read all of that, and then at the end of it, be like, what the heck did I just read? I don't understand any of it. But let's read the question and see if you can answer it. Because it's not as hard as it sounds, right? All of that stuff sounded complicated. But if we look at the question, number 5 says, during which stage do the chromosomes line up across the middle of the cell? Okay. So I remember reading that somewhere. There's something in there about chromosomes lining up. Okay. And there was also something in there, if I look in this picture, I can just look and see early prophase. Is there anything about chromosomes in here? No. What about metaphase? Here's metaphase. I see chromosome, chromatid. Okay, that looks like maybe it could be right. Telophase, interphase. Certainly not interphase and prophase. I don't see anything in a straight line at all, right? We do kind of see this straight line across the middle in telophase, but there's nothing in here in the diagram that says anything about chromosomes, right? So, and that looks to me like it lines up right across the middle of the cell. And again, if I recall, it says right here, during metaphase, for example, the spindle fiber helps align the chromatids in a line across the middle of the cell so that it can divide evenly. So those two pieces of information tell me that the right answer is B. Even if I don't know anything about the process of mitosis and I don't understand half the words I just read, the actual question isn't nearly as complicated as the concept of mitosis. Right? But again, you don't have to be an expert in mitosis. That's my point. And then number 6 says, which of the following is true based on the paragraph in the diagram? Which of the following is true based on the paragraph in the diagram? A, after mitosis, one of the resulting daughter cells is larger than the other one. Okay, one larger than the other? No, they're identical, right? So A is not right. B, after mitosis, the 2 daughter cells have their own nuclei. Nucleus. The 2 daughter cells each have a nucleus. Simple as that. B is the right answer. Okay? I could go through and look at these other 2. The first stage of mitosis is the division of the cell into 2 separate cells. No, that's the last stage of mitosis. And D, the first stage of mitosis involves the formation of cytoplasm. Cytoplasm, I see right there. Okay? So, again, a tough-sounding question, tough-sounding concept, but the questions are easy. And that's the case oftentimes on the test, is that the questions that seem hard aren't nearly as difficult as they at first glance seem to be. All right, let me see what we're doing on time. Let's do a couple more and then I'll call it. I'm going to skip number 8 and 9 for now. Let's do number 10 and 11. So 10 and 11 talk about this diagram of a tooth, right? So it's titled tooth cross section. So what that means is if you cut a tooth in half right down the middle and look inside it, this is what it would look like. Okay? You've got the jaw way down here, the periodontal fibers down here, pulp, nerve and blood vessels, gums over here. This is tooth decay. This layer here is called dentin, and this layer here is called enamel. So the first question just says, which material covers the tooth's top surface? Well, we Now here's the jaw and here's the gum. Right? The top surface of the tooth is this stuff here, the white stuff, which is enamel. Easy. Let's look at number 11. Number 11, a little more complicated. It says tooth decay can eat away at the structure of a tooth. Tooth decay begins at the surface, but it must reach the pole, which contains many nerve endings before it will cause extreme pain. That suggests that the dentin contains lemon. Okay, so let's see what it's asking. It's saying, or what it's telling us, and then what it's asking. Right? It says tooth decay starts at the surface. It starts here and works its way in. Okay? It says it must reach the pulp, which is this layer here, before it becomes very painful. And so the question says, what does that suggest about this layer here? This is the dentin. So does it suggest that there are few or no nerve endings in the dentin? Are there many nerve endings in the dentin? Or are there more minerals than the enamel? Okay. First of all, more minerals than the enamel is one we can throw out right away. It doesn't pertain to the question or the paragraph at all. So it's really, is it few or no nerve endings, or is it many nerve endings? So if it implies that it doesn't become painful until it reaches the pole, then it's inferring or it's implying that the dentin doesn't have many at all, or hardly any nerve endings, because it's not painful, right? So few or no nerve endings. There's your answer, okay? Let's do number 12, and then maybe we will call it. So number 12 says, the carrying capacity of an ecosystem is the maximum number of organisms it can support. Okay, so we talked about ecosystems a few days ago, right? The carrying capacity is the total number of organisms or living things that environment can support. If the carrying capacity is exceeded, there will be not enough resources, and one or more species will decline until a balance of organisms and resources is reached. This kind of goes back to natural selection and survival of the fittest, right? If there are too many organisms in an environment, and the environment isn't built to support that many organisms, then some are going to die, and some organisms are going to thrive, and some aren't, and it's going to kind of work that way until there is some kind of balance reached, right? Until you come at or under the threshold of the carrying capacity. So the question says, which of the following is an example of people overloading the carrying capacity of an ecosystem? Okay. A, using a park for recreation. B, grazing too many cattle on grassland. C, adding a room to a suburban house. Or D, banning shellfishing in included ones. What is an example of people overloading the carrying capacity of an ecosystem? We kind of worked our way through this, but the answer is pretty straightforward. A, using a park for recreation doesn't make sense, right? It doesn't apply to overwhelming an ecosystem. Neither does C, adding a room to a suburban house doesn't fit at all. D, banning shellfishing in waters, again, not quite targeting what it is they're actually talking about. B, grazing too many cattle on grassland is the only one that makes any sense at all, right? So again, another example, just kind of look through it step by step and try to simplify it. You know, the right answer oftentimes makes itself obvious. All right, I'll stop there, and hopefully this gets out to someone in the stratosphere, the YouTube sphere, so that it can help somebody pass the test. In fact, I guess we will call it a day, huh?